In New Hampshire tonight, a fiery debate between the two Democrats fighting for their party's nomination.
The gloves come off as former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and Senator Bernie Sanders spent 2 hours ripping into each other on the issues and their records. KCAL9 political reporter Dave Bryan joins us now with more on the political slugfest. Dave?
Remember when it was the Republican debates that had all the fire? The Democrats were respectful and stuck to the issues. Wow, that sure changed tonight. In their first head-to-head debate, just the two of them, Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders tangled early and often on the issues facing America. For Clinton, who's 30 points behind, according to one New Hampshire poll out today, she had little to lose. And for Sanders, he needs to extend the momentum beyond New Hampshire.
I really don't think these kinds of attacks by insinuation are worthy of you. And enough is enough. If you've got something to say, say it.
Let's talk about what we should do. And one of the things we should do is not only talk the talk, but walk the walk. I am very proud to be the only candidate up here who does not have a super PAC, who is not raising huge sums of money from Wall Street or special interests.
For much of their 2-hour debate, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and Senator Bernie Sanders seemed to be fighting for their professional lives. And maybe they were. A very aggressive Clinton, who was fallen way behind Sanders in the New Hampshire polls, defended her record and progressive credentials, and in doing so attacked Sanders early and often, starting with his record against gun control.
I don't think it was particularly progressive to vote against the Brady bill 5 times. I don't think it was progressive to vote to give gun makers and sellers immunity. I don't think it was progressive to vote against Ted Kennedy's immigration reform.
Sanders fired back, accusing Clinton of being the establishment candidate.
What being part of the establishment is in the last quarter having a super PAC that raised $15 million from Wall Street, that throughout one's life raised a whole lot of money from the drug companies and other special interests. To my mind, if we do not get a handle on money in politics and the degree to which big money controls the political process in this country, nobody is going to bring about the changes that is needed in this country for the middle class and working families.
And as the hostility escalated, there were loud boos during some of Clinton's response.
I think it's time to end the very artful smear that you and your campaign have been carrying out in recent weeks. And let's talk about the issues. Let's talk about the issues that divide us.
Okay.
I don't think you could find any person in political life today who has been subjected to more attacks and had more money spent against her by special interests, among whom you have named a few, than I. And I'm proud of that. But while we're talking about votes, you're the one who voted to deregulate swaps and derivatives in 2000, which contributed to the over-leveraging of Lehman Brothers, which was one of the culprits that brought down the economy.
Sanders hammered away at Wall Street and Clinton's campaign contributions and speaking fees from Wall Street companies.
Kid gets caught with marijuana, that kid has a police record. A Wall Street executive destroys the economy, $5 billion settlement with the government, no criminal record. The business model of Wall Street is fraud.
And when Clinton said she has the experience and background to be president and make the tough calls, Sanders acknowledged she does have more experience than he does.
But experience is not the only point. Judgment is. And once again, back in 2002, when we both looked at the same evidence about the wisdom of the war in Iraq, one of us voted the right way and one of us didn't.
When it comes to judgment, having run a hard race against Senator Obama at the time, he turned to me to be Secretary of State. And when it comes to the biggest counterterrorism issues that we faced, I was at that table. I was exercising my judgment to advise the president what to do.
Well, as you saw, this was a tough, no-holds-barred debate, and it comes just 5 days before the New Hampshire primary. So tonight's debate could have a major impact on the campaign, perhaps not so much in New Hampshire, where the polls are looking pretty one-sided, but in South Carolina, Nevada, and the tests still to come for the candidates, a lot of them ahead.
You know, Dave, you did a really good job there showing just how aggressive Hillary Clinton was tonight. This is the most aggressive that we've seen.
Yeah.
You think her stand in the polls in New Hampshire has something to do with that?
I think it has quite a bit,
Yeah.
a lot to do with it, to be honest with you. First of all, from her point of view, why not be aggressive? When you're 20 or 30 points behind, like in the New Hampshire polls are showing, you don't have a lot to lose, at least not there. But those polls may also have been a screaming siren to the Clinton campaign that it's time to turn up her game and fight like her political career's at stake, because it may well be. If she loses by 20 or 30 points in New Hampshire after squeaking through by the thinnest of margins in Iowa, she's in trouble and needs to really turn this campaign around, because Bernie Sanders right now looks more like the candidate who's gaining strength and has all the momentum, not Clinton, Lena.
All right, Dave, thank you.